You guys, there has never been a better time, and I know that's a cliche phrase in English, there's never been a better time, but I'm telling you, there has never been a better time. The world is changing and accelerating at a faster pace than ever before. Just think of this. Only 200 years ago, the world was back in the dark, people working on farms. There were no cities. There were no cities and urban environments. Everyone was living in farms. And then the Industrial Revolution happened. And that Industrial Revolution brought people out of their farms, right, and brought them into the cities where people started working in factories all day long. Well, over time, people realized that waking up and going to a factory was not the quality of life that they wanted. And that Industrial Revolution shifted. And the Industrial Revolution became an entrepreneurial revolution in the 1950s and 60s, where people began to realize there was more to life. Then technology entered. 1970s, 1980s, amazing enterprises were created. The world began to be connected via the internet. Today we're entering a new economic era. We're entering the social revolution. And I want to talk about that in a moment. But think about this, you guys. In 1900, the World Bank estimated that the global GDP, the global economy, was $1 trillion equivalent, okay? 1900. By 1960, the economy had grown to $10 trillion. By 2000, it had grown to $48 trillion. Today, the World Bank reported in 2016 the global economy is estimated to be $77 trillion, and it will double in the next 10 years. Nearly $150 trillion. What is driving this massive evolution? What's driving this craze of prosperity that is now impacting 7 billion people for the better? There are 4 trends that we see that we believe are changing the world. Let's talk about the first one. First, it's the rise of a new generation. Do you realize that in the next 3 years, over 1 billion millennials will enter the workforce? 1 billion people, millennials, will enter. This is the largest group, larger than baby boomer, larger than Generation X. Millennials will be the largest group in the workforce. Now, what's interesting about millennials is that millennials have a unique way of looking at the world, right? Any of us that are raising millennials know this. Millennials have watched their parents grow up in traditional employment environments. And they're saying, hey, I want more. I want freedom. I want flexibility to live the life I want. I want a quality of life, and I want purpose. I want to do something that contributes to the world. Do you know anybody like this? Does that sound familiar? And what's interesting is that this is actually impacting each of us. I'm not a millennial. I wish I was. We're all getting older. But it's impacting the way that we see ourselves. Everyone in the world is seeking freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. The rise of the new generation. Our second macro trend that's impacting it is really what we call the rise of the micro-entrepreneur. We're all familiar with entrepreneurs, right? Every great company, Samsung, Microsoft, Apple, General Electric, every company has been formed by a vision of a great entrepreneur who saw the world and thought they could change it. Micro-entrepreneurship is a little bit different than that. Micro-entrepreneurship is about not one person or 5 people. Micro-entrepreneurship is about 7 billion people. It's a movement that McKinsey & Company is now reporting as 30% of the working population today is involved in a micro-entrepreneurial opportunity. 30%. That's 1 in every 3 people. In the next 10 years, they project that will be over 50%. In some markets, it will be 75% of the workforce. Now, guys, think about that. Just 10 years ago, if you were to approach new people and ask them about a business opportunity, 1 in 10 would tell you that they were interested, 1 in 10, because only 1 in 10 was doing it. Today, 1 in every 3 people are involved in an independent opportunity of some form. Fast forward 10 years, it's 1 in every 2. So the second macro trend is the rise of this micro-entrepreneurship, which leads to our third trend, which is the rise of the gig economy. How many of you have heard the term gig economy? Yes? The gig economy is being fueled by millennials and micro-entrepreneurs. We're seeing enormous businesses created. Think of Uber, Airbnb. Think of these companies, Alibaba, that are being formed as platforms that enable people to live and work in a more free and flexible environment. The gig economy is all about driving new growth, new business growth, and that's a huge trend. This movement will continue as we talk about the fourth mega trend, which is the rise of social. There's a great quote by a founder of a technology company called Hootsuite, in which he talks about the rise of social, and he says, there is an economic revolution that's far bigger than the internet. It's called social. Each of you know what I'm talking about. 4 billion people today are connected to the internet. 2.3 billion people are connected to social networks. Do you realize in the last few years, as commerce has connected with social networks to form what we call social commerce, over $4 trillion per year are generated through social commerce? Now think about that, you guys. That would make social commerce the 5th largest global economy in the world. Social commerce is larger than virtually every country in the world, and it's growing at 5 times the pace. The future is social. The question is, how do you play in that social world?